Hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile. This is the show where we get to talk about business, we get to talk about sports, and we get to talk about everything in between. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, you know exactly what to do. 5-star review on Spotify, like and subscribe over on YouTube. 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and say something really nice about me and my incredible guest today. I have Ryan George. George, see, I told you, man. I told you, I do this all the time. Ryan Gordon. I don't know why that happened. He's the founder of Common Enemy, 20 years as a fashion executive with Puma and Keen. Ryan, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Sorry about that, dude. Let's see. You're the first
Ryan
interview
George
I
is
have
my-
coming back.
Ryan George is my stage name. That's perfect.
Oh, perfect.
That'll
Oh,
work.
so see, I was doing something I didn't even know. Look at that. I have Gordon written down, but it is what it is. Ryan, I'm very excited to have you on the show today. Shout out Ross. Appreciate the hell out of him on getting you here. We're going to talk about shoes. We're going to talk about fashion. We're going to talk about giving back to the community. But Ryan, the first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
Sports is everything. I mean, sports is not just entertainment and enjoyment, but it's passion, it's mental health, it's physical health, it's all of the above. And it's like one of the few spaces, and basketball is my sport of choice, where you can be so present. You can kind of let everything fade off into the distance, whether you're watching, playing, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big part of my life.
I love that, man. I always, basketball is a funny one, right? So I'm not like the biggest basketball fan. I'll watch any March Madness. I'll watch the playoffs, but it's football season up until the Super Bowl, which we're recording right before the Super Bowl. So I'll start watching basketball in about a week or so. But I always go back to the Office episode, Michael Scott talking about basketball and how it's like jazz, and how the players are running around the court in such a particular way, and it's more improvisational, and it's beautiful. And that, honestly, like, I think that's, as ridiculous as that show is, that one's for some reason just always stuck with me. I found it's so true.
It's a beautiful game. It's not what people know as the beautiful game, but it's no less beautiful than soccer. And what I love about it too is it's kind of like representative of this mosaic of, well, in this country, in America, it's this kind of, it showcases so much diversity, cultural, economic, demographic, you name it. And it's like always this kind of touch point for pop culture, for what's going on. And I know we'll get into it a little bit, but that's one of the reasons I felt like it was going to be such a important area to sort of focus on big changes.
I love that, man. Yeah, basketball, you can always, I honestly, sometimes watching the pregame just to see what the players roll up in is half the fun, right? Like, just seeing the ridiculous, like, Kyle Kuzma, I'll never forget that sweater. It's just one of those things. Like, no one's ever going to wear that. I don't know what designer made it, but I'll never forget that sweater for the rest of my life. It's incredible.
It was a grand opening, grand closing sweater.
Yes, absolutely. That's perfect the way you say that. And it's interesting, right? So you actually come from the fashion industry, as we said. You spent a little bit of time, 20 years with Puma, with Keen, a little bit of time at Pinnacle back in the day. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what was it about the fashion industry? What was it about the shoe industry? Some of these things that drove you in your career in that direction to start, or maybe not start, but spend a lot of time paying attention to what other people wear.
There was a lot of influence coming from some of my older brothers that got to spend some time overseas and sort of like recognized how distinct the fashions were country to country. They started a shoe company when I was still in school. I was studying film at University of Colorado and was kind of obsessed with storytelling, focused on documentaries, focused on editing. And they had started this kind of like up and coming brand and were fighting against some of these 100-year-old icons in the luxury world. It was like a high-end men's dress shoe brand, and they were, cold called a Nordstrom store and got some test orders, and were sitting alongside these, the Ferragamos and the Bruno Mallis, and like we're getting some momentum. And I just thought it was an amazing story. I think there was, some excitement about having a chance to work with some family, and like I gave it a shot. Like I was always on the sales and marketing side, but I was in front of buyers, I was in front of sales managers and sales associates, and was able to like kind of really get excited about like weaving this story of kind of an up and coming brand and what our positioning was among all these kind of legacy, like heritage, kind of, I don't want to say stodgy, but like very different type of aesthetic brand. And that was kind of my entry point.
So your brother started a shoe company, and then however many years later you started a shoe company. That's the universe working itself, man. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it took me like several months before I realized that symmetry, you know? But two very different worlds, obviously, two very different concepts. But yeah, it's kind of hard. Like once you get in it, like there's this term that's been popularized recently called shoe dog,
Hmm.
because of Phil Knight and the Air story.
Read that book. Yep.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, like once a shoe dog, always a shoe dog, man.
That is awesome. And so what like so you're in the industry obviously. It makes sense how you got there. Shout out to your brothers. It sounds like the brand is it's not around anymore.
Well,
It's
it's
still
called
going?
Gordon Rush.
Okay.
Yeah, and happy to give them a shout out. Yeah, they're still alive and well.
Oh
Doing
yeah.
they sell through their website in Bloomingdale's and Nordstrom, other wherever fine dress shoes are
Ooh.
sold.
You got the whole thing down. Look at you. You could get right back in front of sales managers, man. You haven't missed a beat. I'll give you that.
So yeah, I'm gonna start having PTSD here pretty soon.
I love it. I love it, dude. But that's all. So like the fashion industry is such an interesting one, right? And it's the connection to sports is very obvious, right? Basketball in particular, as you alluded to, and we kind of already know, like basketball to me at least is like the sport most connected to pop culture, most connected to entertainment, most connected to fashion, right? I love baseball, big Mets fan. I love football, but there's never the appeal to each individual player on a baseball team or a football team sans the quarterback is not nearly what it is like even for like the sixth guy on the bench in basketball, right? There's something about it. It's also the amount of money that they get, right? Their salary cap's almost as high, split between 12 dudes. Shout out, they deserve every dollar they get.
Sure.
When did you start to kind of put together the okay, so I'm working at this luxury shoe brand? When did you start to say, Puma sounds pretty cool, Keen sounds pretty cool? When did you want to kind of foray away from the hot, like let's call it high end fashion, if I may, and move towards more of a uh, boots on the ground? Speaking with the real, the salt of the earth people. When did you start to kind of decide, hey, maybe I kind of want to move in that direction a little bit?
Well, it was an interesting moment. I got very lucky. I was approached by Puma, and there was a connection between what they were doing and what I was doing. They had a ongoing collaboration with a designer called Alexander McQueen, and I was brought in to basically help manage those relationships with key retailers. So there was like a tie-in to the luxury world.
Mm-hmm.
That was also a position that I had which where I was involved with like the kind of sneakerhead collaborations as well. So that was my first foray into kind of some of these cultural touch points. But believe it or not, incidentally, I left Puma before they relaunched their basketball division.
Mm-hmm.
It happened shortly thereafter. But I was there when the conversations were starting, and I got a sense of the excitement and the market opportunity at that moment. As you know, there up until about, I want to say 5 years ago, there were very few players in that world.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've obviously seen international brands start to make their foray. So yeah.
And so what was it? What did you like about the legacy fashion industry and the legacy shoe brands that you did get the opportunity to work with?
There's a couple things like you sense the history, and if they are able to maintain like the level of quality and sort of really continue to embrace the heritage, the moments that Puma really was at the forefront of fashion or streetwear culture or involvement with certain hip hop icons, like they were very good at keeping that front and center and really trying to like continue to respect and pay the deference that was necessary to those sort of like really important moments in their history. And I also like certainly after coming from like a scrappy startup place, the fact that when they got their shit together and had like a great launch of a new colorway or a new collaboration with a cool influencer or artist, like retailers would come, would be clamoring, and like that was something you never, you're the belle of the ball all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, right? So that was a cool thing, and like it allowed you to kind of move strategically in new ways from a business standpoint. That was really exciting. But don't
Uh,
get me wrong, like working for an enormous multinational publicly traded corporation comes with an exceptional amount of stress points
mm-hmm.
simultaneously.
Yes, familiar with some of the stress points. I'm sure, maybe not exactly one to one, but familiar on some of the things that you're talking about. And yeah, it is. I worked at a little startup, kind of on that salesy side, and yeah, it was like just to get the phone call was nice. And now I'm working for a slightly different company where people are. It's more inbound sales, let's say. More people are calling me now, and it's kind of interesting, as you say, you bring up that word strategy and kind of how to do things, why to do things, and the ways we can kind of sift through a little bit easier than before when we were the ones like, oh man, I really just give me one, like just give me one shot. And now you've kind of made your way back, right? Now you're working. You started up Common Enemy, one of the most comfortable shoes I've ever wear. So appreciate you for that one, man. They're absolutely fantastic. They also, my favorite color scheme is black and red. I know it's super, super mundane, but I love it. It's my favorite one. So absolutely love what the shoe does and how it looks. So it's absolutely fantastic. So what has it been like going back? You start up, multinational, gigantic company, startup. What did you miss that scrappiness? Did you just want to start making a little bit of a difference in the world? What were some of the reasons behind it?
Thank you so much for the shout out. I'm so glad you're enjoying them.
Appreciate you.
Well, it was a moment where I didn't intend to be where I was at that moment professionally. I was working for one of the largest outdoor brands in the country called Keen. They're still privately owned, based out of Portland. And they went through a sales consolidation. And I was based in Southern California at that time. They were trying to relocate the folks that were going to be retained in Portland, and we just weren't in a position in my family to relocate. And so, I took the package and had some time to think through like what the next step was going to be, and I tried to be thoughtful about it. It had been like 17 years, kind of pedal to the metal, and this idea had been kind of like floating around in my mind for several years. And I was talking with my wife at the time and like saying, dude, every time like I get a free moment, whether it's like in between games or like in the shower or like taking a walk, like I can't get rid of the idea. And she was like, well, yeah, and you can't stop talking about it either. And like, it's, just either write the business plan or shut up. And I like, frankly, I mean, I had written I'd done a lot of like strategic planning before, not to overuse that word, but I hadn't done sort of like an official business plan. I mean, I want to be completely honest with you and your listeners. Like, I like went to the, Small Business Administration website and talked to a bunch of friends. Like, I had all my, what do you call it? My frameworks lined up, and it was so painful, but I got through it. And I think it always read a little bit more like a research paper than like a proper business plan. But I shopped it to a few folks, and they were like, oh my God, we think you're onto something, which was this idea that, could we really sort of like take these old standing bedfellows of like social change and basketball and like kind of wrap them up into like make the baby, which would be a performance basketball shoe dedicated to not just philanthropic endeavors, but specifically systemic change. That's kind of the distinction that I think it's important to recognize. Like, we're talking about legislation, we're talking about law, we're talking about public health improvements. We certainly know that impacts individual communities, obviously, and we certainly know that this type of work, and we support nonprofits that are advocating for certain legislative initiatives. It goes hand in hand with, boots on the ground, like food banks and like and recognizing the needs that people have immediately. They can't necessarily wait, for the bills to pass through Congress, but we wanted to take this approach where it's like, let's start to plan for the long term as well. Let's mobilize and educate around these systemic issues too.
That is awesome. And kind of as I was alluding to before, and as you did too, like basketball, I feel like is the perfect sport for something like that because it is so one-to-one, right? Like, I know LeBron James has been in the league for 20-something years, right? When it comes to baseball, I forget some pitchers' names. When it comes to football, if it's not the quarterback, who cares, right? But it's something about basketball that it's so connected to the public and in so many ways, right? In so many different socioeconomic backgrounds in so many different areas of the country. And basketball, I feel like, is one of those sports, like, you need two things. You need a basket and you need a ball. Like, that's about it. It's most parks in America, you're going to find a basket and a ball, or at least the basket, you can go find a ball, right? So I think it's such an easy, it can span so many different people that the idea that you have, obviously, it makes a lot of sense. but the execution of it, right? Everyone's got $1 million idea, Ryan. I'm sure I have 100 of them, and I'm sure you have 100 more, right? It's the actual execution of it. So you said that your research, your research paper, your business plan read a little bit more like a research paper. I'm sure that was great for people to actually see that because of the amount of energy and effort that you put into it. Obviously, the passion too. What was it then like going from, okay, we have this plan, this is cool, I want to give back, but we want to give back in a systemic way, to, well, we also have to make a really sweet shoe, right? Like, you can't just like say you're going to make a shoe and have a shitty shoe and the whole thing's ruined, right? How do you then like balance both of those sides? Like, we need to make a really awesome shoe. It's got to look cool. It's got to feel cool. It's got to be performant, right? And then, which one comes first, I guess, right? Like, how do you then go about that aspect of the business, making sure that that is successful? Because once that's successful, then you can actually live up to, pay back and do what you want to do with the whole of the business.
You got right to the nub of the issue, or the whole, the whole thing only works if the product works, right? Like, that's the nature of the beast. And so the dirty little secret in the industry is, if you are in the know, you can tap into these like roving mercenaries of experts, the folks that can connect you to the supply chain, connect you to the designers and the developers and everything else to get the product made. Now, mind you, it's expensive. You got to have the upfront capital, and we were very fortunate to have enough of an initial investment to like actually get through production. That's obviously going to be the hardest part for anyone. But really, that secret sauce is knowing who to call, who does what, like how to build this thing. It's a lot different than apparel, right? And part of that is, the unfortunate challenge of a supply chain that over 50 years has really kind of shifted from, like from onshore to offshore. This isn't a recent phenomenon. Mm-hmm. This has been happening for decades. But there is nuance that comes with manufacturing overseas. And we really had to tap into that network. So if you know the right people and you know their expertise, you know their reputation, then you can actually start to kind of move the car forward. But you compare what we're doing with, multi-billion-dollar brands, right? And there's obviously a lot more moving parts the larger you get. But ultimately, what it comes down to is wear testing. Right? Like, you have to put in the time to make sure it works. Like, there's machines that tell you that, like, that will, make the shoe, like press the shoe up and down 1,000 times to make sure that there's like tried and true kind of quality concern boxes checked, right? But it's not until you get out there with like 50 different players, all different shapes and size, all different abilities, that come back to you and say, oh my God, this is good. Like, then you made it through the gauntlet.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's got to be a super stressful, like, one-time event too, right? It's just like, hey guys, all of you wear my shoe and now run and jump and throw and do whatever you have to do to see if this thing will blow up, right?
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, probably the most nerve-wracking moment came last summer. So we brought in our first very small production order, which only came, again, like, we were under the minimum order quantities that you would need to get into this group of factories that does, like, world-class, elite level performance product. And we brought in the first order, and one of the first professional athletes that we got introduced to was a former Fresno State center, champion FIBA Euro Champions League winner, and for a club in Portugal called Benfica, which is the same club that the kind of renowned soccer team is part of. A gentleman named Terrell Carter, who is 6'10", like 260, kind of plays more of a traditional center role, and he's a size 15. And he was like the first guy that was wearing it during the championship run that they had this last year.
Nice.
And we're like, dear God, if it can work for him, we might just have something. And he came back, he's like, it plays,
That's awesome.
So from there, it was like, then all of a sudden we're showing up at the World Cup. We've got video of guys, some of our athletes, dunking over Luka, like, with the shoes.
There you go.
And mind you, we just make one color right now, and it's like black on black on black. And so it's very visible, it's very identifiable in these cases. So in a sense, listen, like we're a tree falling in the forest with no one around at this point. We launched with zero marketing budget. We're in fundraising mode. But the fact that we got this credibility so quickly and from, professional athletes, World Cup qualifying
Hmm.
countries, it's a kind of like, pinch me in my dreaming moment for
That's
sure.
awesome. That's like
Yeah.
the famous picture from the Olympics, right? Of whoever that guy guarding Michael Jordan. He just tells his friend, "Hey man, just take the picture of me guarding Michael Jordan. Like that's all I need in this whole thing, right?" It's something similar to that too, right? Like I know, obviously you said Luca. I mean that whole all those teams, right? Like especially in FIBA, right? The USA team is pretty incredible. So the fact that you have those images, those pictures, how do you take advantage of something like that? As you said, you're startup mode, you're scrappy, you're still looking for fundraising, but you have this amazing moment, something like FIBA. You have these amazing pictures where you have athletes wearing your shoes, doing incredible things against some of the greatest athletes on planet Earth.
Yeah.
How do you really take advantage of something like that and just try and tell every single person on planet Earth, like, hey, look at this. This is really cool, but in a way that's, again, authentic, that, because basketball culture, right? You don't, like, there's something about it. You want to be a little in your face, but not too in your face. You want to let people know, but like, yo, it's cool. Don't worry about it, man. Like, how do you take advantage of something like that within the culture that you're trying to grow within?
Two things come to mind. The first is, as far as the mission, um, that was always supposed to be part of the DNA, and we wanted to do it in a way in which we could like name names in a sense.
Hmm.
Like we didn't want to use buzzwords, we didn't want to use generalities. We wanted to talk about specific issues and specific solutions related to those issues. Most of those, yeah, our perspective is most of the biggest challenges that we face from a public health standpoint, especially coming out of the pandemic, are things that have to be tackled, at a legislative, at a federal level, right, for it to really kind of move the needle in people's livelihoods. And this has been true of legislation through the last 150 years. Um, we needed people to know that it was authentic in that regard. Like there was no bullshit. We're going to say exactly what it is we do, exact percentage, and we're going to be as transparent as possible on the back end when we grow. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. The other part of it is it's kind of like from a marketing standpoint, from like a storytelling um, standpoint, there you're faced with this quandary these days where everyone is like focused on one single, point of visibility when it comes to exploration, right? There's not as much like the smartphone revolution has put us in a point where there's only like eyeballs are only in one place at one time. And that's good in some ways, it's terrible in other ways. And we realize that you can't just kind of go to like the digital marketing playbook. You can't just go to like you can't completely buck that trend and just go to like brick and mortar. Like you can't just go OG in that sense. We feel like the way to do it is to be present in communities in a meaningful way, and it's our big plan is to anchor all of our product releases with events associated with areas of the country and what basketball means in those different areas of the country. And I think I'm going on a little long here. I don't
No,
know
no,
if you
no.
want
I
to
like this. This
that's
is good.
all. Yeah, so our thought, we're kind of tentatively calling this 40 runs in 40 days. And the idea is that's like take Colorado Springs, Detroit, San Jose. We want to kind of like descend on these areas and tell the stories of basketball runs in these areas through like these unsung heroes, these players, these pickup games in these areas, and do it and tell it through local artists, local filmmakers, musicians, creatives, and kind of weave that into the bigger picture of public health, how it relates to their local policymakers, how it relates to the community involvement. And we feel like if we are present in that way and we're doing events in that capacity, we're holding tournaments, we're doing screenings, we're understanding what people's needs are and connecting with them in a meaningful way from the ground up, like that could hypothetically be the groundswell to really become much more present, much more aware, or to build awareness in a meaningful way rather than just doing digital media spend. Isolate it. Yeah, I'm not like if anybody, no one's gonna, if anyone's listening that plays in that world, they realize like, yes, we have to have that as a component to our marketing strategy, but we have to be real. We have to be alive in these communities.
But to add on to that, right? Like the best part of digital, the best digital marketers are the storytellers, right? So you're going to have all this content. You're going to have all these people. You're going to have all these places that you're going to be able to tell the story of Common Enemy through, as you said, the artists, the athletes, the specific things that are happening in the community that you're trying to help with, right? You're trying to help that, as you said, is not just, I don't want to say just, it's a poor way of saying it, but you're trying to help the legislation. You're trying to go to the absolute root cause. Yes, you can donate money to a charity that's incredible and they'll help people, but the problem will most likely still be there. If you can actually change something through legislation, that will be able to actually hopefully get it to the point where less and less people need this charity, right? So it's kind of that thinking that you have, and I think that's such a really cool way of going about kind of the guerrilla marketing tactic, right? Because as you said, like, I work for, on a digital, acquisition team, right? And the amount of money that we have to spend to acquire customers is, it's money. And unfortunately, multi-billion-dollar conglomerate startup. It's very difficult for startups. Again, I've seen it when I worked at a startup, to be able to play in those sandboxes because the money to enter is just so absolutely massive.
Sure.
And so now that you're able to take this idea that you'll then be able to grow, tell those stories as you alluded to in the beginning, that's kind of your thing, and be able to tell those stories through the digital media, as well. I think you got an absolute hit on your hands, man. That is such a cool idea.
Oh, thank you so much for that. Yeah, you grasp it so well. And I realize, like, this still boils down to, what's going to be the streaming platform? Like, what is this? Is this a completely different, like, is this a whole different sales pitch that we'll have to be doing? Potentially, but the reality is that it won't, we're never going to get away from the fact that you have to connect with people individually to make this happen, like from an actual visibility standpoint and from a demand generation standpoint. But to comment on the mission component of it and the legislation piece, yes, like we're going to be in congressional districts, we're going to be educating, we're going to be relaying like the fact that, listen, these folks how are they voting in this capacity? How are they utilizing the resources that are at their discretion? There is, we live in an exceptionally wealthy country, right? It's like not always just about, you can't snap your fingers and necessarily have everything overnight in a functional way, but we do, if things are resourced properly. I remind people sometimes, like I heard this amazing interview, and not to go too far off topic here, but like it was recently, I think, the 50th anniversary of the passage of the initial Medicare bill by Lyndon Johnson, and like they enrolled, I think it was like 28 or 30 million people. Like you can fact check me, but it's something along those lines, like with postcards, overnight.
Yeah.
Right. So like there, I don't think there was much staff for it, but like literally overnight. So I mean, when there's a will, there's a way. When people want it done, they can get it done, and we want to educate in that regard to help people advocate for their own well-being.
I love it, man. I think it's such a cool idea. I know we only have a couple minutes left, so I'm very curious. 40 days. Is it 40 straight days? 40 days, 40 different cities?
We think it would be. No, it's going to be broken up. It's going to be kind of we just like we like that.
It sounds a lot better the way you say it. So I'm not going to edit that out, but don't listen to the last part that I just said. No, that's going to be a huge undertaking. What are you guys like? What is going to have to be necessary for you to actually be able to do something like this? Like it would make sense if you tried one or two, but it sounds like you guys are going no. Like to do this, we're going to do this. How difficult is this going to be, man? Sounds like a huge undertaking.
Oh, well, I mean, like once we find the right investment partners in the business across the board, not just for marketing but for staff and production and product development. Like, yes, we will definitely like get the first 5 out in the world and see what the response is like, and then move forward. But keep the
40 days part.
Yeah,
definitely
it's like
keep
a
the 40
North
days.
Star, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I like it. But I think it's a great marketing idea, man. I think it could be super impactful for your business, obviously, but more impactful for the people that you're trying to help, and then the performance aspect of these athletes, man, getting to wear this awesome shoe that's super comfortable, that looks really cool, and that does its job, man. I think, you have a great idea, and I always believe in community. I think that's one thing, especially with smaller companies, they don't take advantage of enough, is like building word of mouth. I'm a marketer, you're a marketer. It doesn't matter what either of us say. We'd be lying if we said word of mouth is not the number one best piece of marketing. 100%. It is. It always will be. It never won't be, right? So it's one of those things, if you can start getting in front of people and getting advocates, and you get one person to tell two people, and then those two people tell two people, and those two people, like, it's just a simple, spider web. It's a lot easier, obviously, said than done. Sure. But once you can really give people that understanding of what and why and how and where, obviously, to buy, I think that's just one of those most important things. And you guys, sounds like you'll be the product rocks. So now it's just executing, getting it in front of as many people as possible, because from there you guys will be successful.
Man, oh man, fingers crossed.
Yeah, man. Well, how much money do we need? How much money are we looking for?
The raise is $2.5 million. So
okay, that's doable. Come on, listeners, start a GoFundMe. Let's start a GoFundMe or something. Throw a couple of bucks his way. Why not, right?
I heard an interesting interview with like the guy that was heir to the Oscar Mayer family fortune, and like they've, he was talking about giving away a lot of money. Like, there's a lot of those legacy wiener brands out there that I think are really, ready to give. I
love it. Well, if we can get, if he's a listener, whoever this gentleman is, please just give Ryan a couple million bucks.
Sorry,
man.
I don't know where that reference came
I love
from.
it. It's a great. I'll tell you this, Oscar Mayer, I don't think it's been brought up too many times on this show. That's for sure. Ryan, man, this has been absolutely fantastic. What social media handles? Where can we follow you? Where can we learn a little bit more about yourself personally, as well as the journey of Common Enemy?
Oh, thank you. Well, let's just start with the Instagram.com/Common Enemy Basketball. You just type in Common Enemy, it will show up on Instagram. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ryan Gordon. CommonEnemy.com. Anyone want to send me an email, I will respond directly.
I love it, man. This is awesome. Thank you. I'll put all of the links in the show notes for everyone, so you can go buy a pair of shoes. You can go check out the Instagram, and then we can watch the 40 days, 40 cities in 40 days. I can't wait, man. It's going to be absolutely fantastic. Ryan, thank you so much for giving me a little bit of your time. Time's the only thing we don't get more of, so I appreciate you giving me a little bit of yours. But other than that, hope you have a great rest of your day, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure.